Hello and welcome to the third installment of RPG Design Talk. Today I'm joined by DM James from the channel DM James Play OSR. DM James now, I think he went back to the link all in the description below. DM James, and many people don't know, did publish a game and he now made it available on the Big Geek Emporium. So you can find the link there. And as you know, like RPG Design Talk is all about talking with people that came from having an idea to making it a complete product that is available for people to consume, and picking up their brain, how you actually actualize your idea. And he's also a prolific YouTuber. If you're not subscribed to DM James, I assume everybody watching here must be. If you're not, you should give him a look. He's a general good guy, and he has a lot of things to say about games because he's the one that has played game for a long time, has played many type of games. I've looked at different systems, stuff like that. So I'm glad to have him today on the show. Thank you, James, for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me, and also your intro is awesome. I love it. Great
Thank
job,
you. Man. Thank you. Something I thrown on like last minute before the first show.
Oh, it looks great. You did a great job. But yeah, I wrote a game in 2007, I think. And there was two reasons. One, I was injured from work, and two, my mom's eyesight was going bad. So I'd be like, we were playing Labyrinth Lord, and I'd be like, roll die 8, and she didn't have any idea. So I come up with the idea I would just make a game that used one dice. And I think the mechanics are pretty solid. The rest of it, could probably use work because I didn't even like go back through it and edit it. I just wrote that game in like 3 days. I was just sitting there taking pain meds and writing. And I think the pain meds actually helped a lot because it made me a lot less critical of my own writing. You know what I mean? It's
Yep.
like how they say like great writers are oftentimes like alcoholics or whatever. So they can actually get stuff on the paper without being hyper. But
lower the inhibition.
Game. It's basically active and passive tasks. Anything that's an active task, which means you're doing something against something that can move or whatever, is a contested die 20 roll. Anything that's a passive task, so climbing a tree, that's a passive test with a target number set by the person running the game. That is the whole system, and it just runs on a D20. And you only need one D20 to play the whole game. You don't need any other dice.
Even for the stat generation I was reading, it's done with like an average of 2 roll of 2D20.
And average them and then add racial modifiers because, I was kind of ahead of the game on that too, because when you picked your class and background, that modified your starting attributes. And that's something that supposedly 6th edition D&D is doing.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're a farmer, you get +1 to your strength. Well, if you look at my game, it's got all that in it, except I did it in 2007. So I don't know if they ever got a copy of it, or maybe just, I think in the gaming community, there's a lot of parallel development.
Yeah, well, you might be familiar with the concept of noosphere. Like once you put a thought outside in the world, then it kind of became available to everyone.
Right. And I did talk about the game quite a bit way back in the day, because after I wrote the game, my game group all made characters, and we played about a year-long campaign, and it ran perfectly great. As a matter of fact, my daughter quit playing role-playing games, and she told me the only time she would ever come back over and play role-playing games is if I would run that game. That was the only game she ever really liked, because I mean, it's really simple. Everything's, like a sword is 1 point damage, so that just means however much you beat your opponent by, you multiply that number by the weapon value. So if you rolled a 20 and your opponent trying to defend rolled a 1, you did 19 damage. And of course, their armor would get to absorb a part of that, but so there you can see there's a lot of influences there, like armor absorbing damage. I think I originally got from whichever edition of RuneQuest it was that came in a box and had the Vikings on the cover of it. I don't know if that was first or second, but
I don't remember.
That was my first encounter with a game where armor absorbed damage, and I remember I didn't really like the game, but I loved that concept, because it just made sense.
It's an old debate about in role-playing games, should armor make you harder to hit or absorb damage? It's one of those like sempiternal subject that always come back.
Right.
I find it's an interesting what you're bringing it out to the table here is interesting, because like unlike other guests I had so far, you're the first one that kind of designed a game in a way almost out of necessity, because you wanted to solve an issue, because you wanted to play with your mother. Your mother had this trouble like differentiating the dice, and you say, okay, then I'm gonna make a game that my aging mother can play. I think that's a very interesting take there.
Which is the thing with my mom, is she really got me into fantasy. She read The Hobbit to me, and then I read The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. She got me into all this, right? And she bought my first D&D box sets and stuff, but she would never play the game with us ever, right? But then once I turned about 30, and I had my own place and was married to my wife and stuff like that, we asked if she wanted to play D&D, and she said she would. But then, and she was a regular part of our game group, and she would have been in her 50s at that point. She was a regular member of the game group for the whole time she lived in Florida. And the problem was her eyes started getting bad. So the first thing we did is we got her a set of dice where each dice was a separate color, so that somebody could just be like, okay, your damage die is the green die. You know what I mean? But then later, I was like, I'm just going to make a game that has one dice. And you just rolled I guess we could have just played Traveler, honestly. But then I come up with this game. And like, again, I didn't edit it. There's nothing professional about the game, guys. That's why it's free if you want to look at it. But I think the mechanics behind it are really simple, easy to use, and incredibly flexible. If somebody has climbing skill and they want to climb a cliff, you just determine as the guy running the game how difficult it is to climb this cliff. I mean, if there's a lot of handholds and stuff, it shouldn't be that hard. Or maybe don't even make him roll. If it's kind of slick and you really gotta, then it might be hard. And then they roll a die 20 and they add their skill level to that, and they succeed or not. So in a way, I guess you could say I was influenced on that bit by Traveler, Call of Cthulhu, Warhammer Fantasy, roleplay. There's a lot of games where you get your skill plus attribute equals the number that you add to modify a die. But the damage part of it, I've never seen any game do damage the way I do. Not saying my way is better or worse, but no game I've ever played where you compare defense and offense to determine who did how much damage.
Yeah, and it makes that you basically, for an attack, you always have one roll to make that do both the hit and the damage.
Which we found in the playtest, or actually it turned into a campaign, made combats really quick, but it also at lower levels made combats really deadly. Because if you rolled that 1 on your defense roll and an orc rolled a 20, and they were using a weapon, say a greatsword that does 1.5 damage, well, 19 plus half of 19, which is going to be rounded up, so that's going to be a 9 or a 10. He did 29 damage to you. And at first, second level, that's pretty much you're going to roll a new character, unless you're wearing just super great armor or something. But even plate mail, I think, only absorbs like 5 or 6 damage. So, and every attack that hits always does a minimum of 1 damage.
And I there's something I often say, and we often talk about when in those talk, is like that done is better than perfect sometimes, and you just have to put it out there. You can never wait until like something is perfectly like fine-tuned and stuff like that, because it will never be in some way. And I think that's also a lesson you can learn from that. You say, oh, it's not perfect, I put it out there, it's for free, you can look at it, maybe I'll revise it later with the comments from people.
Or maybe someone else will take that rule system, because you can't copyright a rule system, and I'm not worried about it either way. I mean, I'm a retired firefighter, so I'm not like trying to make any money off of it. So if somebody just likes the system and wants to write a game based around the system, another genre or something, I would be honored if they would just put like based on DM James game, or something, and that's all, that's all. But you are right, and the reason I'm not advocating for drug use.
I was about to ask.
I'm not advocating for drug use or doing the Hemingway where you wake up first thing in the morning and pound down some whiskey or something. But I've tried to publish adventures for OSC and other BX style games. And now that I'm not on tons of, hardcore pain meds, I constantly self-criticize to the point that I end up, I'll get like a lot of pages written and then throw them away because I get too critical. I think the most important thing if you want to design a game is to just write it down and put it out. Because too many people could probably write amazing things, but they're so critical of themselves that they never get it done. I know you support heavy math use. Yeah, I support heavy math use.
Matt, yeah.
I know what he's saying.
I know what he's saying as well. That's often sometimes I like to ask as well, like when you design a game and stuff like that, how much math was involved. And I'm not doing like what Justin is implying there.
Well, my there, like on one of the starting pages, there's an actual like equation of how the game works, and it's like D20 plus mod versus D20 plus mod, winner gets what he wants. And then for passive checks, it's D20 plus mod versus target number set by GM, and if you succeed, you get what you want. That's the whole game. That's everything in the game. Now, my magic system is different because it works off of mana points and mana pools, and there's the spells, you learn like a spell, but there's multiple levels within a spell, and and you gain back 1 mana point per hour of rest. So instead of having to memorize spells first thing in the morning, you just know spells. They're like skills that the mage would learn. And you get to pick which spells you want to cast, and the level of the spell is how much mana it costs to cast. So if you have like 5 mana, you can cast that 5th level spell, but now you're done until you rest. Or you could cast the 1st level spells 5 times. So the mage has to make up their mind how much of their energy they're going to spend.
There's a bit of like resource management for the mage there.
Right. And there's a couple of different casters. There's the like a cleric, priest type that heals, a wizard, and a shaman. And I think the shaman's whole deal is spirits. They can summon spirits to do things, and you know, I'm not sure what I was inspired by with all that. It could be some of the MMOs I've played, to be honest. I mean, I played Dark Age of Camelot for years, so I could have been influenced by that too. So,
were you really worried when you were writing about stuff like balance or making stuff like when you were determining the various level of a target number that, oh, I want this should be succeeded about that percentage of time, or you just like went about with feel, just like
what I did is, and one of the benefits of making a game where everything's based off die 20 is it's easy to convert that over to percentage odds because, you know, it's just 5% per side, right? So I decided that, you know, an easy task should be successful 80% of the time, let's say. So then the target number is going to be lower. And then that's what I did. I just did it by percentile. But did I worry about actual balance? No, not at any time. Some of the monsters I think might be way more powerful than the level of them suggests, and some weaker, and the classes are not all. I did not even try to balance the classes. You know, if you wanted to play, if you can even say classes, it's like if you made a human and decided to become an assassin, then you're going to be good at the skills that come with being an assassin, right? But that doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to be summoning meteor strikes down like a mage could, you know. Everybody has kind of their role, but yeah, I didn't worry about it. Just like when I run AD&D first edition, I don't worry about balance. I do what makes sense, you know. If it makes sense for there to be a certain monster in a certain area, that's what's going to happen. What's up? Just drop in before I take a nap. What's up, Flatey? How you doing? Arn Man, long time no see. How you doing, Arn?
Yeah, we can go look to the chat. I was about to like, so hello Flatey, nice seeing you. Justin is here as well. Balance for Monopoly, not RPG. That's RPG are so complex. They have so much going on that it's taking balance in RPG is almost like impossible.
Well, Arn Man, if you go to Biggest Geekus and you download this game, you'll see that any character can learn the stealth skill. I put move silently and hide in shadows and all that. I just made it one skill, stealth. I think because there's basic skills and there's like specific skills. I think only assassins actually get the disguise and poison skills. But pretty much anybody can learn to, sneak around. However, your armor will definitely screw you up. If you're wearing plate or lamella or something like that, and you're trying to climb or swim or sneak about, you're going to have huge penalties to that roll. Whereas if you're not wearing armor at all, then it's going to be much easier. Also, so I make my elves immune to cold damage for some reason.
Oh, really?
Because they live in the Arctic and they're 100% carnivorous. They never eat vegetation at all. And they tend to, I guess I kind of based them on the Sami. They kind of roam about in the taiga with reindeer. And part of that advantage is the elves are just basically immune to cold. Trolls, since they're so heavy, can't swim at all. They sink like a rock always, every time. The dwarves had some ability. The gnomes are kind of evil. Orcs are evil, but you could play a half orc. Human is the norm. And then halflings are just hobbits, really. Their special ability, the halfling special ability, is that I think they all get like stealth for free no matter what they try to do, like as a career. And in wilderness situations, they can just automatically vanish into the woods. So, like I said, you'd have to read it and decide how you feel about it. But I was really just going for flavor. And one of the players played a gnome mage, and the dude loved it. I mean, he felt like his character was so powerful because he could summon like fire elementals and all this. And the only character I felt was a little overpowered was one of the guys played a troll and he went like full warrior.
Mm-hmm.
And by the end, his like damage resistance and hit points and everything and was so high that this guy could like block a whole hall and just be like, yeah, you can't hurt me. Which the players loved. They loved that. And then, of course, I believe my wife and my mom were both playing archers of some sort. So archery's kind of good because you can only defend against it if you have the dodge skill or you have a shield.
And also, like the range attack goes before melee attack.
Right.
And, yeah.
Right. So don't believe that hunger guy. He says he's starving, but I know for a fact that he had ramen noodles.
Hello, Mercurius. Nice seeing you. GM Johnny as well. Crafting Gamer.
The Crafting Gamer. Yeah, Crafting Gamer, you would be proud of me. I have been knocking these 3D print houses out in all kinds of multiple colors and just doing some crafting over here, bro. Just making it happen. So did I have a basic turn duration mechanic? I think each turn was like 10 seconds or something. I think. Mm-hmm. But, I could look. I mean, I've got the PDF on my computer, but it's been so long since I've even looked at it. Like I said, I wrote it 2007. So that would make it 15 years old, I guess. Yep. 16 years old.
16 years old. Yeah, no, time flies.
Right.
That's something I often like to ask the guest about writer's block and how to deal with it. And I guess we kind of touched about it already because, like you said, you wrote this game like in 3 days straight where you were like on pain medication, prescribed pain medication. And but now when you try to write an adventure that, like you said, you write those pages and then you throw them away.
Yeah, it's because I am as a person a little bit of I'm learning not to be, but I used to suffer really bad from trying to be a perfectionist, and I think it's because I'm very competitive. Just naturally, I'm a very competitive person. So anything that I do, I want to be better than anyone else ever did it, right? And when it's not, then I get frustrated and throw it away. But, over the years, I've learned to get over that. So now I can knock out, like a whole unit of Warhammer figures in a day because I'm not so worried about painting every single eyeball or whatever. But when it comes to writing, and again, guys, I'm not suggesting anyone go out and start taking a bunch of oxys or anything. I was only on all that med because I fell from a pretty high height and broke my neck. But the just not giving a damn made writing so easy. I think that's why Stephen King can write as quick as he does, is because if you deal with him on Twitter, you can tell this is a guy that does not actually give a damn about anything. And he'll just, vomit some stuff onto a page and throw it out there. And if you like it, you like it. I hate pretty much everything he ever wrote, but your mileage may vary.
You recently, even though the game is 16-year-old, you recently put it available on Big Geek Emporium. Again, the link is in the description below. But you didn't really take a second look at it really deeply. You didn't try to do a re-edition. Would you be worried that if you were trying to clean it up a bit, maybe make it a little tighter, fix the writing, that then this critical side would come in, and then you would back off and get cold feet? Is that something that you considered? Or?
Yes, I think what would happen if I started going through it is I would rewrite the whole game and then throw it away. So I pretty much leave it alone. If I were going to edit it, I would probably ask my wife to do it. I mean, she's university educated and everything. And I think she could be unbiased enough but she's real busy right now, so that's not going to happen. I mean, she works a lot, but I probably would like somebody to edit it, because I'm going to be honest, I'm not really good at spelling. I like to tell people, because of the place I grew up in, Kentucky, that English is actually a second language. You know, I had to actually go through years of speech therapy to get where I am now. You know, when I left Kentucky, because no one in Orlando, in Florida, could understand a word I was saying. I was like Boomhauer, basically, you know, just using words that, like, I still sometimes use words and people look at me weird, but they're common in the Appalachian region and nowhere else. Like, if the wind's blowing really hard, you would say it's very airish. If something is not level, it's Sigoglan.
Oh, wow.
So if you've seen somebody's house and it was like leaning, you'd be like, that guy's house is Sigoglan. If your carburetor got full of tar because, you know, you ran something bad through it, you'd say that's all gommed up. That carburetor is gommed up, you know, and that's just a start. I mean, so when I actually moved to where people speak common English, it was a bit of an issue. Not really game related, but yeah, if I know for a fact, if I reread my game, I would start picking it apart and criticizing everything I did, and I'd want to change it. But the problem is, once you start changing one thing, you got to change another thing, and then I would end up with something that's not what I wrote. And I ran that game for a year, once a week, for about 4 or 5 hours of play session for a year, and everyone who played loved it. Now, granted, most of them were friends and relatives, so they could have been lying so as not to hurt my feelings. But they all showed up and they all had a good time. And, you know, they liked, like my wife liked every time she got to level up, I also used milestones in the game 15 years ago. It was like you level after every 4 adventures, no matter what level you are. If you go through 4 adventures that are challenging for you, you should level at the end of them. And that was just something I did so that I wouldn't have to worry about XP that much. Even though I think I do have XP in the game, but that was another option. And yeah, mana points. I think I probably stole that from Rollmaster and Middle Earth Role Playing. I'm not saying anything in the game's actually unique. I mean, I've played so many games. I'm sure I've been influenced by a lot of them.
And that's something I'd like to talk to you about as well, because like you're one of those people that like, because I've seen some people, somebody told me once, like, oh, you know what, my hobby is not RPG, my hobby is D&D, and that's fair, and I can respect that because it's very honest. I'm into RPG. I like to experiment. I like to try different system. I like to try different game mechanic and stuff like that. Different settings sometimes. Although setting, I experiment a little less. I got to admit. But you're a guy like that as well, that likes to read and play different game. And you, like me, read rule books as a hobby in itself. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. I was actually talking to my mom the other night, and we were talking about Dune. And she was talking all this crazy stuff, and she's like, "Do you remember that?" And I was like, "Mom, I have to admit, I only read the first book." And she's like, "Oh, I thought you read, you know." And I was like, "Mom, I haven't read an actual novel in 25 years." And she's like, "Well, what have you been doing?" I was like, "I read game books. Those are my novels, you know, like I have so many games that I know I will never run, but I've read them cover to cover, like Coriolis. I really love Coriolis as a sci-fi. But I'll probably never run that, because the only sci-fi game my group likes is Frontier Space. So it is what it is, you know. Right now I'm running Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. And the last game I ran was I was playing Vampire the Masquerade 2nd edition. For like 7 or 8 months.
Well, you were as a player then.
As a player, which was cool. That was nice. And then Before that, we played a campaign of AD&D that had went on for like a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
It was, well, actually, it was a hybrid of AD&D First Edition and Adventure Conquer King.
Mm-hmm.
Because some of the players had Adventure Conquer King characters, and some of them had AD&D characters, but the systems are so similar. You know, it's like if someone showed up, if I were running Old School Essentials Advanced, and someone showed up at my table with an AD&D character that was of the appropriate level,
Mm-hmm.
it wouldn't confront me a bit. He could just sit down and play his character. Because, I mean, you know, they're
It's
so similar.
OSR.
They're
It's
so
most
similar.
OSR is mostly made to be compatible with one another. That's kind of like a feature of this movement, I guess.
Well, that's one thing I've said when you come to game design, old school games,
Mm-hmm.
you can modify them and add and take away stuff, no problem. A lot of the newer games, like Wizards of the Coast versions of D&D, if you start messing around with any of the rules in that game, the game will collapse because every rule was so tied into every other rule, you know. So that's why I actually like BX AD&D First Edition over any later versions of games, and that's why I play OSE, because that's basically what it is.
Because that's something I wanted to know as well. Like what appeals to you in a game system? What do you choose? Like now you're playing Warhammer Fantasy. Are you more like, is it like more based on setting, or is it like specifically like, because setting you can always like transplant from one game to the other? That's pretty easy to do. Or is it something about like, oh, I like those set of rules, I like the lethality of this, I like this one, the randomness is more toned down, or what is it that appeals to you in a set of rules?
Well, as you said, for me, the game I want to run is typically determined by the setting.
Mm-hmm.
And like Warhammer 40K, Warhammer Fantasy, I've been a fanboy since the early 90s. And I basically gave the group a choice of games we could play. I was like, I can run Call of Cthulhu, either 7th edition or Pulp, whatever you guys want. I could run Cyberpunk Red. You know, I gave them a list of games I was willing to run, and they all settled on Warhammer Fantasy because a few of them had played it already before, and they already knew they liked it. But really, yeah, when it comes to the games I run, it's for me, it's more about setting than math.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay has an amazing setting. Now, those punk ass Irishmen at Cubicle 7, they're trying to ruin it with the crappy art and the 4th ed version,
Mm-hmm.
but the setting's still amazing. The old world is an amazing setting, and I love it. If I were going to run any version of a Die 20 fantasy role playing game, though, it would probably be OSE or AD&D, because that's the ones that I like to run. I have ran Cyberpunk a couple of times, and I like that game a lot. I've never run Coriolis, but I've thought about running Coriolis, but using the Mongoose Traveler 2nd Edition rules, because the setting is amazing, but I'm not so sure I like the system. Guardian says blend ideas from all the games. Yeah, I think that's what I did. Guardian, go to Biggest Geekus, download the game I wrote for. It's free. It's 100% free. Just download the PDF and read it, and maybe play that game where. And then when the next time I stream, you can post where you think I got all the ideas that are in it from. Because yeah, I'm you know, if you read 50 game rules, there's no way you're going to write a game that's even unconscious, like subconsciously, you're still going to draw from the things you know.
Yeah, you
I
always
mean,
like, there's always this oh, I really like this mechanic from that game. There's always but
Iron
I don't
Man,
like
how do
this
I get my
part, or
money back? Iron Man, Joker. I have money on Lulu. I've never actually had put into an account yet, because the print version was on Lulu for a couple of years, and some people actually paid for it, which is amazing. But I would have put it on there for free if I could have figured out how.
Well, for the print on demand might be.
But print on demand, yeah. I think they charge $5 and I get 75 cents. But even at that rate, I'm about up to $20. So, some people have bought the game. I'm not saying it's the greatest game ever or that you guys will love it, but I ran it for a year and all of my players absolutely loved it. But, and not to be arrogant here, I don't want to sound prideful. Was it the game or was it me running the game? And just keeping them interested in it. Because I have found in my life that you can take a really crappy game, but if you've got a GM that can dodge and weave and make things happen, then that game will be good.
Because like those talk I'm having here, like I said in the start, I want to make those talk about how to go from having an idea or having and having something out like it. And I think I'm not worried too much about because I have a lot of respect for people that I kind of, would you say, walk the talk, because it's easy to have like those I'm working on a system, is going to be the greatest thing ever. Nobody's ever going to see it because it's never going to get done. You know what I mean? So then it benefit nobody. But
well, I mean, kind of quote Shia LaBeouf, just do it.
Just do it.
Just do it. I mean, I know that's a total cop-out, but I wrote the game on Word Plus with the freaking, corrected my grammar and my spelling and all that stuff. And I just wrote it. And then when I wrote it, it was on PDF and I converted it to PDF. And then I uploaded it to Lulu and I ordered myself 10 copies. So the money in there might be just from me. And I handed it out to all my friends to ask them what they thought about it. And they all liked it. Apparently somewhere in East Orlando, there's a group that plays my game.
Already.
I don't know what they've done with it since then, because like I said, it's been 10 years, but Hungar was telling me that something about it. And Hungar's ex-wife, she looked through it and she liked it and she might run it, they play 3rd edition D&D still. So
because it's a game, it's a fairly rule light game, so with the rules getting out of the way, there's always going to be like a need for that, like just like one simple mechanic that you roll.
Yeah, if you look at it, I mean, the rules are very light and it's very easy to understand. And a lot of that was me making a game, like we said, for my mom, who's getting a little bit older. And, I wanted to make a game that she would feel very comfortable with. And she did. She made her character, and my wife would help her when she leveled up, decide what she wanted to raise skill-wise or not. But she could play it no problem, because I would say, like, the orc charges towards you, swinging in his axe overhead, and then I'd roll my die 20, and she would be like, well, I've got my shield and sword out, so I'm going to try to block. And she'd roll her die 20, and we just add up, and it was simply that easy. Or she would say, I want to climb up this tree because there's a bear chasing after me. I actually use that as an example in the game, right? And I'm like, well, the tree's easy to climb, but since there's a bear trying to bite you, I'm going to make it where you don't do it automatically. You got to make a roll. She made her dex roll. She climbed up the tree to get away from the bear. You see what I mean? Because even passive checks can be modified. If you're trying to pick a lock and somebody's standing behind you trying to cut your throat, the passive test all of a sudden becomes super hard because there's a guy trying to kill you.
The stress, yeah, exactly.
So that part of it is in the game. Most of that 131 pages, Iron Man, is probably spell descriptions, and there is a bestiary as well. It might only have 50 monsters in it, but there is a bestiary. And that's where I got the idea where dragons, their colors don't matter. In the game I wrote, a dragon is a dragon. And whatever color it is does not matter. It's evil. It wants to kill and eat everything and to hoard gold. That's just how dragons are. So there's no silver dragons that are going to be your bestie or have kids with you. In my game, dragons are just evil. And there's a couple types. There's wyverns, dragons, and worms, spelled with a Y. And that's just straight up Tolkien. I ripped off because a worm is just a dragon without wings. And a wyvern is just a dragon that doesn't, instead of being hexapedal, it's bipedal. And then, of course, a full-blown dragon. That's the toughest one, you know. And, you know, orcs are orcs, goblins are goblins. The monster stats are pretty easy, too, because it just gives you their, like, how many hit points they have, what armor absorbed they might have, their offensive and defensive bonuses, and a little bit about what, you know, treasure they might have. And that's really easy because a goblin might have a offense and defense bonus of +1. So that's it. Every time I roll my die 20 versus a player, I know I'm adding 1 to that. He might have a damage absorb of 2 because of hardened leather armor. That's all I need to know about goblin. And they have like 6 hit points or whatever. That's all I need to know. Some monsters have special abilities, so there's a little bit more about it, about draining life and stuff. Like my undead, of course, didn't drain levels. They drained your constitution. And so depending on how powerful the undead was, it was how much con they would drain. And if your con or strength or whatever ever got reduced to 0, you instantly died. And then after a number of turns, you would rise as one of them. So, yeah, the game was pretty hardcore like that. My settings, they're giant lizards
that seem to be rated, but no breath weapon.
Oh, yeah. On my my homebrew, my dragons are all based on elements. So I have fire dragons, earth dragons, wind dragons, you know, water or river dragons, and then their breath weapons are kind of based on their element, and what they look like is like earth dragons don't have wings, but they have an ability basically like the bullet where they can swim through the earth, you know, and then wind dragons fly really, really fast, and their breath weapon is just like a super powerful concentrated gust of wind that can knock you down and stuff like that. But all dragons are evil. And, you know, I've talked about in my campaign how the ancient dragons will wake up and they'll lay a clutch of eggs. And then that clutch of eggs will hatch and it'll just go off. And then all of a sudden, the empire is being attacked by like a wave of wormlings. And if you don't kill them fast enough and they eat enough before you kill them, they can, you know, basically evolve to the next level, like Pokemon, I guess, you know. And then it gets even worse, you know, because now they're even more powerful, you know.
Do they get along or do they fight each other?
They fight each other anytime. Yeah, like when, say, an ancient dragon lays 100 eggs in a clutch, like 50 of them will be dead before they get out of the cave because they'll just kill each other and eat each other. And then as soon as they get into the wild, they split in every direction because if they encounter each other, they'll kill and eat each other. They do not work together. They're not intelligent until they reach adult status. Then at adult status, my dragons start becoming intelligent, and ancient dragons are like super intelligent. But the wormlings and juveniles and stuff like that are barely smarter than a dog. And they only live to eat and sleep. They'll eat as much as they can, then they'll hibernate and grow and then come and eat more. And then eventually, you know, it becomes a bad problem. So killing dragons in my homebrew campaign of OSA is not, I mean, it's not easy, but it's not uncommon. You know, the last time we were playing, the group was literally hired to go kill a bunch of earth dragons that were wormlings that come out of the mountains. And they killed 2 or 3 of them. You know, they were about the same stats as a bullet, you know, figure. So for a group of 7th level adventurers, it was a good fight, you know, but not anything, you know. Now, if they tried to fight an ancient dragon, they would just get roasted, you know, it just killed them. But
I was a bit surprised earlier when you said that you choose a game based on its setting, because you talked about, on your stream your homebrew setting that you have sometime, and you usually have like a interesting idea in there too. Like you have this setting you call was it Karamikos?
I was influenced very much by Karameikos, the Grand Duchy from Mystara. Only it was my first encounter with a D&D world based on Eastern Europe, because Karameikos is based on Romania. So then when I created my homebrew campaign world, which at this point would probably be 15 years ago at least or more, I based it on Kiev and Rus, like right before Ivan took over and united the princedoms. So there's a little bit of Warhammer in there. There's a little bit, but mostly it's Kiev and Rus. And then I sat down and I went through all the fairy tales, and I actually statted out some of those Slavic monsters for my game, and I added them into the encounter tables. So like I was saying in my last live stream, there's like 100 kinds of vampire in Russian mythology. It's like everything wants to suck your blood. And somebody said they made kobolds into vampires, and I was like, even if they weren't undead, the idea of blood-sucking kobolds is terrifying.
Yeah,
They creep into your farm at night when you're asleep, and they drink all the blood out of your goats. So they're chupacabra, basically, is what he said. And I was like, wow. His setting has one old badass dragon. The others are just giant lizards. Well, that's cool. You basically got like Smog and then a bunch of wormlings running around. When I play Greyhawk, though, because I did run the group through White Plume Mountain and a couple of other the Greyhawk adventures, I play rules as written for that setting, and I am a huge fan of Greyhawk.
Because there's something you seem to be drawn to in the setting, because like you talk about Warhammer and also you talk about Adventure Conqueror King, and your own system based on kind of inspired by the Russian Kiev, but and by the Rus Kiev, but there seems to be like a common theme here of having some kind of like historical inspiration, like because like Warhammer is strongly inspired by the Holy Roman Empire, the setting of Warhammer, and then Axe is inspired by the Byzantine Empire, and then
Eastern Rome,
and your own setting now by old Russia.
Well, I think a part of that is before I'd ever played my first role-playing game, I'd played historic wargaming. As a young kid, there were a couple of teachers at the school. These guys were probably in their 40s or 50s. I was like 14. And they played Johnny Reb and some Napoleonics games. And I was interested, so I started playing those games with them. And I think that my history teacher was so good that I developed a love of history. And when I think about writing anything for a game, a lot of times I like I said, I will be inspired by history. Like my elves that herd reindeers around, I mean, that's historically a thing. And I was asked, are the castles in my game made of wood? Some of them are, yes. Some of them are made of wood because it is based on Kiev and Rus. Now, the big city of Kaliningrad has stone walls and a massive castle where the Tsarina rules. And there's a lot of problems going on right there because she's only 11. And her father and eldest brother died in battle against the forces of the West March. So, the archdukes of the empire are all vying to try and become a regent until she's of age. And that's caused, basically the empire right now is in the middle of a three-way civil war between the archduke who rules the eastern part, the center, the archduke that's loyal to the Tsarina, and then the western part, which the people from the western part actually culturally are more like Finns. And the players are stuck in the middle of that. So monsters from like the Witch Mountains and the various other horrible places on the world, they've started raiding all of the outlying farmsteads because the patrols that used to patrol the roads to make sure they're safe, they're not there anymore. Literally Stojanov Keep, which is where the players are based out of, which is a Russian big wooden walled thing. They only have 20-minute arms in that whole keep because they've been drained so much to go to the Western Front, and it's not going good. So the players have been trying to decide, do they try to stop the humanoids or do they try to stop the Western guys that are coming in, doing their thing, burning villages down and whatnot. So my D&D games tend to be full of a lot of combat, but also a lot of politics, a lot of maneuvering for rank and stuff. But that's because the characters are all like 7th to 9th level, so that's kind of where they're at. Like technically right now, the one of them could just take over Stojanov Keep and kill Joseph Stojanow's son, because Joseph Stojanow is probably dead. He was battling in the West, and no one's heard from him in weeks. So, but yeah, that's just how I do my settings. I also have Arnman. I also have gunpowder weapons, but they're rare. The Strakovi, who are the elite guard of the Tsarina, are equipped with matchlock rifles or muskets and bardaches. But they do tend to wear like Lamnar armor. And so you use the bardach to brace the rifle and then go to war. That was a very big thing under the first Tsar, Ivan. So yeah, I basically a long drawn out thing. Do I use alignments? No, I don't.
Short answer. Yeah. I wanted to ask you because like I'm also drawn usually to like more historically inspired setting and stuff like that when I run game. I find that those settings do a lot of the heavy lifting for you because you can just like rip stuff from history, and you can make interesting what if scenario, and it's also a convenient way to convey information to your player. You can say like, oh, it's based on this kind of time period, and it allows the player. It gave a lot of verisimilitude of ressemblance, and then it allows the player to make assumption based on the setting. I find that it in a way favorizes the role play, because they can assume that people are like people, and they're going to act in a certain way so they can interact. They don't have to stop and ask those questions. Have you found this to be the case as well when you go with a more historical setting, that it free the players to role play more?
My homebrew setting or the Warhammer game I'm running, it's super easy to describe things. Like if I try to describe a house in Altdorf, I say, hey, do you guys know how those German houses look that go up and then come across and there's almost a tunnel, and they have, and they're like, yeah, and like that. Oh, okay. Then they got in their head. They're walking down a cobblestone street, and it's a bunch of those, Central European style houses, and there's barely any alleys, because they're all kind of connected together. And if I want to describe someone, if I don't have a miniature to put on table and say, he looks like that, like some nobles did some horrible stuff to the players last session. And when one of the players was like, well, what do they look like? And I was like, well, one's a kind of a husky guy, overweight. The other one's tall and skinny, but he's got like this weird looking chin. And they're dressed up kind of like, and then I said, did you ever see the original Romeo and Juliet from like the 60s? And they're like, yeah. And I said, well, they're kind of dressed up like that. They got those kind of hats with the feathers, and they've got like the slash sleeve, and everything they're wearing is very fancy, and they're clean, and then everybody's like, oh yeah, we got it, so, and in my homebrew, if I tell somebody, well, this guy's wearing Lamnar armor with a bardach and a matchlock rifle, and he's got a big beard. He looks like a Russian, you know. He's wearing a new shank on his head. I mean, everybody's like, yeah, I totally get it. Now, when I ran Talos Lanta for those guys, it was way harder to describe anything. Because Talos Lanta is a fantasy role-playing game that takes every trope from fantasy role-playing games and throws it right out the window.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I still love it. But it is a lot harder to describe, you know. I just love history. I mean, anyone who's ever sat in on one of my live streams know I love history.
Yeah, I find that when you try to make your setting too fantastical and stray away too much from what people know, in a way, the setting becomes the center of the show instead of being the character being the center of the show. I don't know if you understand what I mean.
I know exactly what you mean.
Yep.
That is the reason I was never a fan of Eberron.
Yeah, exactly.
I think Eberron could have been good, but they killed too many sacred cows. And, you know, it's so weird. I'm playing a game where there's literally chaos demons roaming around and people are packing around, you know, flintlock pistols, and I'm okay with it. But the lightning train and all the flying boats and stuff, which do exist in Warhammer, but the dwarves make them, it threw me off of Eberron. And halflings riding velociraptors, I couldn't wrap my brain around it. It was just too strange, you know?
Yeah. Stray away too far from the tropes, and then you have to almost rewire your brain to conceptualize it. Right. There was like an argument about the background, and I think it was from the Black Lodge game stream. If you not subscribed to a Black Lodge game, you should look them up. But they were talking about your character should have a background, because your character didn't just explode off the ground, but it doesn't mean that he has a whole story that already happened to him. And somebody like replied to him like, here's what Shakespeare told us about Hamlet as a background. Hamlet, Prince of Denmark. And that's it. And the guy was saying that as a own, like, oh, you don't need a background, but like when you say that, because it is based in the real world, just saying Prince of Denmark, we know what a prince is, we know what Denmark is, we know what, you know, yes, it's 3 words, Prince of Denmark, almost 2.5 when it's barely a word. But it does come, because it is based in the real world, it does come with a context that instruct us a lot.
It's like if you were playing Lion and Dragon, or before that, Pendragon.
Yep.
If someone described a tourney, a joust, a knight, whatever, I mean, all the players at the table know what you're talking about. You don't have to get into a bunch of detail. You know, you can say the Duke of Abertane is on one end in his black, you know, painted armor, and on the other end is the Duke of whatever and in his green painted armor, and you're watching them, you know, do the joust, and you're up next or whatever. Everyone gets it. It's so easy. I think a lot of people, there was a game called Jeroen, and a lot of people liked Jeroen, but again, it was another one of those games that it was like, it killed too many tropes. And I'm thinking of another game. I actually tried to run Empire of the Petal Throne, but it's so freaking weird that in a 4 or 5 hour session, you'll spend 2 of those hours just describing what something looks like, because it's on an alien world, and there are literally, you know, multi-limbed, weird looking aliens roaming about, and all this kind of stuff is happening. And you know, so
there's also this thing when you're in a setting that try to kill the trope and do something weird, like you describe, like, oh, there's an halfling riding a velociraptor, and like player can go like, oh wow, oh no, but that in that world that's normal, and then it's like, oh okay. So at some point, like, they don't know how to react to something that you describe, because like you made the weird kind of mundane. So when something weird happened, they're not gonna be like, oh okay, that's weird, because they don't know. They cannot jump to the conclusion that it is, because maybe in that world it's normal. If you keep your world like relatively normal or aligned to the trope that we used to, then when something weird happened, they can have this genuine reaction to, oh okay, this is weird.
Oh,
and
yeah,
yeah, this is weird.
Yeah, I'm 100% in agreement with you. It'd be like if you were playing a Greyhawk campaign with your friends, and they met a halfling who had somehow caught and trained a velociraptor, that would be super cool. But when you make that just the norm, then it's like, who cares? Now, Crap Gaming says Empire of the Pale Throne is a great game. I have a couple of editions of it, and I'm not saying it's not a good game, and it's definitely like the guy who created it was pretty much a genius. He created a language and alphabets and all this stuff. What I'm saying is, I guess I just don't have the skill to run it, because I do rely a lot on, and maybe this makes me a bad DM, put it in the comments, but a lot of times when I'm explaining something to my players, I like to be able to have a real world analog so that I can say a knight walks up to you wearing plate armor. Imagine, the late Gothic period, Germanic armor with a Saleh helmet, and he's got like a big ass Lucerne hammer. And if I have to, I can literally put a Warhammer figure on the table, and then everybody's like, "Yeah, I got it." But games like Taoslanta, Empire of the Petal Throne, Jaroon, stuff like that, they get so far away from the tropes. It's like trying to describe a tall in Talislantia. These are gigantic, hugely muscled ball humanoids. They're basically kind of human. They all look identical, except they tattoo themselves, and that's the only way they can have individuality. So every time you try to, you're like, it's a tall, it's a big, completely hairless human covered from head to toe in tattoos, and that's a lot harder to explain than it's a guardsman with a breastplate and a halberd. Okay, I know what that is.
Yeah, he said, like, a crap phone said that the lack of trope in the Empire of Petal Throne was one of its strengths. Like, yeah, it's gonna be to each own, and you had got to be a role player.
Though. Right.
But
that's what I'm saying. I must be lazy because I like to have real world analogs to stuff. Some people can get around that.
But that's the thing too. Is I find when like there's those very like weird and complex world, I think they get in the way of roleplay more than they enhance roleplay. At least for me, that's the experience usually I had. Like, because like the roleplay should be about the characters, not about the world.
Well,
and you're getting
last night Max was talking about. You guys were all talking about watching what's it called? YouTube channels and being told how to run the game by various YouTube channels, right? And I was sitting here thinking, I do that too sometimes, but I always couch it as this is how I do it at my game.
Yeah.
Because no one knows how to actually run the game the way someone else does it. Trying to act like you know the way to run AD&D First Edition and everyone else is wrong. I disagree. Everyone
we can do it like as a goof, like when we something say like, oh, that's the way you should do it. You don't, you're wrong. But we're joking when we're doing that. It's always like it's opinion and it's a matter of taste.
Well, like in my games of AD&D, I just completely ignore unarmed combat. I completely ignore their initiative system because I love Gary Gygax to death, but that shit is too much of a pain in the ass. I ignore weapon versus armor modifiers. I did try to do that, and I built a couple of those little spinny things so that the players could use them. But even with the little spinny things, it's just too much of a pain in the ass to wait. Okay, I have a mace, and he's wearing chainmail. Let me spin this. It's like, no. So that's why I think BX is the thing. Now, a great game master who has really immersed themselves in Empire of the Petal Throne is going to run an amazing game. I want to say that. I'm not blaming. I'm not talking bad about Empire of the Petal Throne, Jaroon, or Taoslanta. I'm saying that.
But also you don't need like a great GM in those systems, in those settings. I should say you also need like players that are very invested and that are willing to make the effort to learn the setting. So you don't have to. Because then you can take like oftentimes like players are lazy.
Problem that you just said that most people never touch on.
Yeah.
The players sitting at the table and not doing anything to learn anything about the setting. And which it's like if I'm running Greyhawk, I bust out the little thin original Greyhawk Gazetteer and I put it on the table and I tell people, if you want to know something, look, it's in there. And all the information in there is what players would know. There's nothing they shouldn't know in there. But yeah, imagine trying to run a vampire game and none of the players know anything about World of Darkness, nor are they even interested in learning.
But even like in the World of Darkness, that's also something they did. It's based on the real world.
Right.
There's only like the fantastical element that you have to add up to it, and a lot of it is tropish as well. So,
and that's what I'm saying with Empire of the Petal Throne. I'm agreeing with you. If you have a DM running Empire of the Petal Throne and all the players have read player information, they understand the world, they know what's what, then it's going to be a good game. But unfortunately, a lot of new players are completely lazy. You know, and I don't want anybody giving me more than maybe a paragraph of a backstory for a character, but I do want you to kind of understand the world your character lives in. You know, see, Iron Man squirted me with a water bottle.
Yeah.
Bad DM. Yeah. I never claimed to be the best DM. I only can say that I generally have 6 to 10 people at my table every week.
Yeah.
But then again, one of them married me and has no choice. So maybe reduce that number by 1. And she had a choice, but then I'd mope because I like her to play. We met kind of at a D&D game. So,
and if you want to have something that is a bit weird and alien and different too, another solution is to go with something that has been like a book or a movie, mostly movie, because they're easier to consume. And like I said, people are lazy. Like if we talk about Dune, you want to do a game of Dune, people can just like watch one of the movie, preferably like the 84 one, which is the good one, and then they can have an idea of how the world is. It helps a lot. You don't have to give them like a lore book and say, okay, study that and then come to the game.
Right. One game that I've ran that everyone that I've ever ran it for always liked was and this is again going back to what you're saying, agreeing with you, Shadowrun. Because there's elves casting fireballs, but you're standing in the middle of a city street and like Palliot, on the outskirts of Seattle. So if I'm running the game and they say they're going to go on a ghoul hunt in an abandoned apartment complex, it's like you guys pull up to the abandoned apartment complex. It looks like a Soviet style block housing building, and then they know. And then when I say the ghouls, I describe the ghouls. They look human, but their teeth look bigger because their gums have pulled back and their nails are bigger because, and they're like, okay. And I'm like, and they stink and they're filthy. And then the guy playing the troll's like, okay, I bust out my LMG and then you go into combat and they're like, everybody knows what an LMG is, a light machine gun. Everybody knows what a heavy pistol is. So Shadowrun or Cyberpunk, even though it's futuristic, it players get it because it's like, okay, you're in downtown you're in downtown Night City in the middle of the combat zone, and a couple of killer clowns come out from around a corner and they're looking at you, and it's like, boom, everybody knows what the deal is. You don't have to go into detail.
The fact that those games has a base that is like either in reality or either in established trope, it free you from describing what is mundane to describe what is weird. And like this comment say here, like a good horror, the alienness is the strength. Right. But even in the good, like to have something to be alien, you have to have a normalcy established first. Right. And if your normalcy, if the mundane, like I say, is so strange already, then it's a lot of work to establish that as well. How do you deal with a 4-faced barbarian? I cannot pronounce that. Augia. And that's the thing. You can have like those 4-faced barbarian as well in any setting, but when you meet them, there's something that
a four-faced
inspire
barbarian, a Hagya, he's probably
Oh, yeah.
talking Empire of the Petal
Yep.
Throne.
Yep.
Because it has, first off, it's not on Earth. It's an alien world. And then in addition to that, it's in a pocket dimension. And when the humans originally arrived, they were not good to the aliens. They put them on like reservations and stuff. But now the human technology is like medieval because they got cut off from the rest of the empire and they collapsed back to the medieval era. And the aliens are starting to come off the reservations, and the part of the planet that was terraformed is starting to get taken back over by the, he's probably, this one, okay, this is the first one I see. Okay, I got that one's there too. So this is the Tristat system one, and that's what he's probably talking about. And like the culture, the human culture and Tucumel and all that is like a blend between Vedic Hindu and Aztec Mesoamerican. So already it's kind of weird, right? We're not talking about Eastern or Western European culture.
At least it's weird for us, I guess. Like if you were like from one of those culture, maybe for somebody that's from India is already familiar with the Vedic and do
right.
So maybe that.
And then also in this game, most people, if you're not actually in the middle of combat, you just walk around in a loincloth. I mean, so that's a thing. Like even the females.
Yeah, that's what I do when I'm not on stream.
So there's a whole thing with that. Let's see here, though. There's the coyote-looking people, and I have no idea what this big armored bug is, but yeah, everything is they're alien. Just it's really different, and if you're not really good at running it, and the players aren't balled in with it, this is a hard game to run. Like here, the Inimicals. These are like one of the aliens that actually lived on the world before the humans came.
Are they just like monster? Are they like playable character or?
If I remember correctly, some of the aliens you might actually have been able to play. Because there are some aliens that actually will work with the humans, but there are others. I keep calling them aliens when in fact it's their world.
Yep.
There are others that absolutely hate humanity, and they're just kind of wanting to freaking see. This is the other one, and I'll tell you, tell anybody. First off, this guy wrote his own language for the game. The game has its own damn language. And also, don't buy this book if nudity, I'm not going to show it because I don't want you to get whatever. But don't buy this book if nudity bothers you. Because almost every female depicted in this book, unless she's a warrior or something, is walking around topless in a loincloth. Because apparently the world is very hot. You know, like India or, Mesoamerica. So clothing is not really, it's not like you're playing in like at my Kiev and Rus campaign where summer times are brisk 60 degrees or whatever.
Yeah. But when it comes to those
are intelligent but inimical to humans, and that means that they hate humans.
But that's it also raises another question, like how do you play, like, because even like when we talk about like fantasy game, like people want to play elves, it's always a question like how do you play an elf that is not just like a human with pointy ear,
Well, in the game I wrote, like I said, my elves are 100% carnivorous. They never, like, it's like a taboo almost in their culture to eat anything but meat. And they had tried to conquer the whole world from the original dimension they came from, but a couple of heroes detonated their elf gate, but that basically wrecked a whole continent. So then the elves just started becoming reindeer herders, the ones that survived. And that's kind of their thing. Every now and then a young elf will journey south out of the taiga and become an adventurer, but eventually they always go home.
Do you have any players playing an elf or?
My wife almost always plays an elf.
Hmm.
And their culture, like I said, is based 100% on like those people in the way far north of Finland. So the Sami or whatever, you know, they wear like reindeer hide clothes and everything they have is made out of a reindeer. And they just kind of follow their herds of reindeer doing their thing, you know. And they are naturally basically immune to cold. So, which could be a good ability if somebody tried to chuck a cone of cold at you and the elf is like hardy har har. That don't affect me, you know, because I'm, you know, not a human. However, I don't. I mean, I think there's a reason D&D is so popular, and I think that if you try to make a game that breaks the tropes that make D&D popular, you're gonna hurt yourself, right?
It's also like a D&D in a way popularized a lot of those tropes as well because they've been around for so long. A lot of the video game have been inspired by D&D and stuff like that. So a lot
Well,
of
plus
those
Tolkien.
tropes and Tolkien, but like a lot of like the because Tolkien like made those tropes, but at the time there was other people also publishing fantasy and stuff like that with different tropes, and it's the fact that D&D kind of like itch itself to the Tolkien trope that kind of crystallized those tropes, in my opinion, in a way.
Well, I mean, I agree with you entirely because you could follow the Tolkien tropes, or you could follow the R.E. Howard tropes, or you could follow the Fritz Leiber tropes, which would be closer to R.E. Howard than they would be to Tolkien. And anyone who's watched my channel at all knows I absolutely love the Modifius Conan 2.20. Love it.
Yep.
But the ladies, I have females at my table, ladies, and they, for whatever reason, hate Conan. And I've tried to sell it to them and be like, look, you know, whatever. And I even have a live play where I ran Hungar through a solo Conan game for like 2 or 3 hours. That I love Conan, and you can't get any further away from Tolkien really than Conan. I mean, there might be elves in Conan, and the Cimmerians talk about the little people in the mountains, so there could be dwarves, but these would be so rare, you know. And magic is always bad in Conan because in order to learn magic, you always have to find someone to teach it to you, and usually that's like a Cthulhu type monster. So, you know, it's not like the whole I'm Gandalf the White now and I can do these things. If you run into a mage in Conan, they can do things like make you vomit up beetles until you die. You know, it's horrible stuff. But it leans heavy. I think the reason the girls don't like it is the Conan game. The system is good. I would like a 2D20 system. They're making a generic one. But
not as going to be woke as well.
Too masculine, you know, because you got Conan and it's all about, you know, stealing stuff and
it's all about brown and imposing your will on the world and being
right. It's a very masculine game. And when I did run it for a group of dudes, they loved it. I mean, my brother was playing a Hyrcanian archer. My nephew joined us and he was playing, I think, a Zimbabwe warrior. So from the Black Kingdoms in the South. And then what did Mike play? A Bosnian archer, I think. You know, so we had this wide range of ethnicities, even though everybody at the table was white, except for the Puerto Rican guy. But he was playing a white guy. But then my brother was playing an Asian guy, and my nephew was playing a black guy. But everyone was just having the best time, you know. But the girls were like, nah, not doing it. So back to AD&D we went. Yeah, Lankmare. I love Lankmare. I've read all those books. I have all the Lankmare products for DCC. But I prefer R.E. Howard far more than I do Fafford and the Grey Mouse.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of
like
those our like the Conan and the Solomon Kane story. I'm a big fan of them. I wanted to
yeah,
address
I've even
this
got a
comment.
miniature here that looks like Solomon Kane.
Yeah, well,
That
those are useful in the Warhammer Fantasy,
in Warhammer, because one of
Witch
the
Hunter.
players is a witch hunter.
Mm.
He's changed from being a courtier to becoming a witch hunter after he saw a demon eat somebody's face off.
Yeah,
And
I wanted to address this comment a bit. Game scope matters to me as a player. I really dislike the tell us what your motivation is kind of thing. I don't know how you feel about that, James. I like when
don't know what he exactly means. In Warhammer, your players can choose motivations, like
Mhm.
a group motivation and a personal motivation. But all that means is if they achieve their goal, they get bonus XP. So I'm not 100% sure.
I like when
I
when they
do
start
like
a
in D&D
campaign.
the players to have goals, though.
Yeah, I like when
I would
when
rather have
the
goals than a background.
I like when they start a campaign to tell me why their character is adventuring, because adventuring is kind of something that sucks. You're not going to Disneyland. You're going into dark dungeon, into places that probably stink, and places that are dangerous, stuff like that. What pushed your character to choose such a life? In a way, that's something I. It can be necessity. It can be maybe sometimes wanderlust. It can be an appeal for glory or profit. But try to find something. It doesn't have to be super long, but
I mean, not to be a downer, but if you look at the Lord of the Rings, bringing
mhm,
Lord of the Rings up,
mhm.
none of them chose to be part of the crew with the ring bearer. They did it because they had to.
Yep.
And as soon as they were done, they stopped. They were done
Mm.
adventuring, right? But then
Yep.
if you look at Fritz Lieber's Falford and the Grey Mouse or Conan, they do what they do because they're outcasts, because they can't do anything else. Like Conan, until he becomes the king of Aquilonia, the only thing he can do is adventure and be a mercenary and a thief. Because what's he supposed to do? Get a job baking bread? He's not going to do that. It's like, so in D&D, I would argue in a Dungeons and Dragons type game, most of the players have to be outcasts that for some reason or another just could not get a normal job.
Yep.
Because for every adventurer that finally makes it rich and gets the dragon hoard and becomes a king or whatever, there's probably 100 that die bleeding out in a dungeon somewhere alone, because they took a wrong turn and a trap got them or an orc stabbed them or something like that. Being an adventurer is not a smart plan for a healthy life. I mean, especially in old school games where if you failed a saving throw, you were just dead. So yeah, your player shouldn't be unless he's like super narcissistic and he wants to be a hero just because he wants to prove to some girl back in his old town that he was worth something and blah blah blah, or revenge. I mean, there's got to be a reason your character just didn't stay on the farm.
Crapphone says something very viscerally appealing about an incredibly ancient city rotting quietly, full of corrupt old sorcery, and that is appealing to a certain
Conan.
type of people that you could call those people deranged.
Yeah,
especially like when there's like
people would never want to go in there.
No, exactly. Normal people just want to live a quiet life, peaceful life.
Right.
Have bread on the table and
a
no
little bit
worry.
of comfort, hang out with your family, enough food on the table that you're not hungry. That's what normal people want. Crazy people seek out that weird city in the middle of the desert that's been there for that's a Conan adventure that I'm mentioning, the city in the middle of the desert that was haunted and full of monsters and whatever, but it would work for Falford and the Grey Mouse or any of that other stuff. Adventurers are crazy. No one goes into a dungeon under a ruined temple that was devoted to an evil god to root around because they're normal human beings. No one would do that. It makes no sense, It's like being airborne. Who jumps out of a perfectly good plane? Crazy people, right? Or being a firefighter. Who runs into a house when it's on fire? Not normal people. Normal people run away from that shit.
not
And
run toward
adventurers
danger.
are not normal people.
Yeah.
Tulsa
Rex
Doom
still say
and
old
Conan
school
movies
D&D
do
kind of
the
feel a
same.
bit like sorry. Rex still say old school D&D kind of feel a bit like Middle Earth if Robert E. Howard or other pulp writer wrote it, and that's something I often heard. Like it's like you're playing Conan character in the Lord of the Ring world.
Right, right. And it's that. See, the Conan, another great thing about the Conan role playing game is what you had said earlier, just to circle back a little bit, is it's really easy to describe things.
Yep.
Aquilonia is basically Rome,
Mm.
right? Corinth is basically Greece.
Greece.
The one with the Z down there, that's Spain. Pictland is basically the Celts, except they're
it mixed with Native American a bit.
Yeah, with a little native thrown in. The Bostonians are like your Welsh. The Sumerians are kind of Celts, and then north of Samaria, Asgard and Vanaheim, and I mean, you know what that is, just the name of it. And
you got some Persian there. You got some.
Yeah, if you go to what is it near the Viliot Sea, Turan, those are Persians.
Yep.
The Hyrcanians are Mongolians. The Brythonians are Germanic. And north of Brithonia, those guys are Russians. You know, I mean, so it's really easy like that. Now, what he described with that abandoned city, I mean, yeah, you could use that in Conan, but that could also be used in Call of Cthulhu too.
Yep.
There's actually a story,
modern or like 1920,
where the archaeologist is in the middle of the desert, and there's this weird city, and all of the passages are very low. And he don't understand why the passages in the rooms are very low until he meets or he finds mummified remains of the people who did it. And he realizes none of it's human. None of it was made by human hands. I forget the name of that story, but I'm a huge H.P. Lovecraft fan. I read a lot of it.
Tulsa Doom in the Conan movie shooting the snake arrow with the deep James Earl Jones voice, Seek.
Oh, they couldn't find anyone better than James Earl
Jones. Like that was like I love this is one of my favorite movie ever. This old Conan movie. I think it's a great movie, and I like Conan quite a bit, but also love Tulsa Doom so much when I was a lad.
Yeah,
he was such a fascinating character, like great villain.
When that movie came out, I wasn't allowed to watch it, but I did anyway. And the first time my mom watched it, she threw up and walked out of the theater.
Conan the Baker, DCC funnel character.
Right.
That's an interesting way to look at it, because we're talking about motivation. The funnel in DCC kind of take care of that.
Right. You know, you start with your 4 characters, and if one of them lives, there's your character. I mean, that's pretty good.
For like regular people, level 0 that are thrown into something.
He says Lankmar, great restaurant, short lifespan.
I don't know what Lankmar is.
Lankmar is basically the Rome of the Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser world. It's this massive city. They call it the city of the black toga because the rich people all wear black togas. And it's built like in a swamp. And to get to it, you got to go like the highways on like this raised causeway. And there's like a street, the street of gods, where all the different gods are worshipped. And a lot of them are not good. And then the gods of Lankmar themselves are like these big skeletal undead things that have these rods that if they hit you with them, you just die. But there's like a goddess, some of them worship of disease and poison, and there's a spider god, and there's Isaac of the Jug. He's kind of like their version of Jesus. Like he was tortured to death for your sins, so he's got a little bit followers, and it's really cool. I've got the box set that Goodman Games put out for Lankmar. It's a huge, very well detailed city, and TSR actually put out an adventure or 2 for Lankmar as well. They do got some weird stuff too. Like in Lankmar, ghouls are not undead, but they do like to eat humans. And their organs and flesh and everything is invisible. So you can only see their bones.
Oh, I see.
And Fafhrd meets a female ghoul and ends up like dating her. Even though all he can see is her skeleton, apparently the stuff he couldn't see was really nice. So he ends up dating her for a while. But
He cannot sit, but he can feel it.
Yeah, I guess a lot of those stories are very much Fritz Lieber. Really, they all connect, but you could read one and then read another one over here and get it. They're like episodic, but they still all are kind of.
I never read anything from him, but there's an omnibus that's gonna coming out from his of Grey Mouse and the Grey Monster, Fafner and the Grey Monster. There's an omnibus coming out in August, so I'm waiting for that. I'm just gonna pick it up and probably read through it all.
I found Fritz Lieber and Jack Vance really easy to read.
Mm-hmm.
Like the way they write is very easy to read. Now, Jack Vance, his Dying Earth series and all that stuff gets weird, but it's easy to read. But it's strange. There's a lot of strange stuff going on there.
Yeah.
Difference between Gods of Lankmar and Gods in Lankmar. Yeah, the Gods of Lankmar are like giant undead death machines, and if Lankmar gets out of control and it starts not doing what it's supposed to do, the whole city, these dudes will just show up out of their tomb and they'll take care of business until everybody calms the hell down. And then Lankmar goes back to business. Across the sea from Lankmar, there's another big city, but I don't remember much about that.
Did Goodman Game put a supplement for that, you think?
There's a box supplement. I don't know if I've got it where I can easily... Yeah, actually, I do. What do you know? I have the box supplement right here. And this is Dungeon Crawl Classics Lankmar. And this one I actually opened. And of course, that's Fafford, who is from the frozen north. And that's the Grey Mouser, who actually started out as a mage apprentice.
Yep.
And then eventually got into thievery. But this thing is, it's a setting and it's just full of giant maps and all kinds of stuff. And then Goodman Games put out a whole series of Lankmar adventures, like 10 of them. So if you really wanted to get immersed in that, again, that's more pulp. So that would definitely be more like your R.E. Howard kind of stuff, not your Tolkien stuff. But
yeah, I'm generally more into that than the epic fantasy. I like the pulp. I like the smaller, more personal story. I'm a big fan of that, even for the games as well.
But I mean, if you're going to write an adventure, though, or you're going to write a game to actually put out somewhere, and I might put some of a lot. I've been told, I don't want to say a lot. I've been told a few times, that if I would put out a setting booklet for my homebrew setting, that these guys would buy it. Now, I would sell it. I would just put it out and let people have it. But I think the key is to not be overcritical with yourself.
Yeah.
If you're
that's something I wanted to go back to as well, because like that's kind of the pick of those we really debate, which is all right.
You invited me here to talk about writing stuff.
Yeah, we're on an hour and a half mark, so trying to wrap up. That's exactly what I wanted to ask you about. Like, what's in the future for you? Are you gonna put out like a setting or adventures like that? Because I watched your stream. You know that I've been watching your stream for quite a while now.
Oh yeah, you've been a regular for a long time.
Yeah,
you yelled at me once because you said I was promoting promiscuity.
I was teasing you.
Oh,
you were though.
You know what? I prayed and I said, you know what? He's right. I shouldn't be doing that. But I used to be 20 years ago a much different person. You know what I mean?
I know I was as well, but we need to grow and
to finish it up. Like people. You said, I have been plotting and planning to write my. I've already showed off the maps of the world multiple times. I probably should do the maps up and then put them on Biggest Geekus so people could just download the maps. And if I do a scenario or a setting for my thing, I'm going to copy the first Greyhawk Gazetteer. It's going to be, this is the Empire. This is what goes on here, 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 here. Moving on to the next one. This is this area. This is what they do. I'm not going to try and write this giant 600-page thing, because I like it when you leave enough stuff open that the person could pick up. Like, I absolutely love the Iron Empire setting book for Adventure Conqueror King. It tells you just enough about what's going on to run a good game. That, I think, that and the original Gazetteer for Greyhawk, that's how setting books should be.
Yep.
If it's more than 20 or 30 pages, you probably screwed up, right? And I'm sorry if there's people out there. I know that there's a lot of people with giant setting books, and that's cool. But I think, like, the problem, people say this about the Forgotten Realms. There's nothing forgotten about those realms now. We know every square inch, all the way over to the Kuratura, or whatever they're calling it now. Because I know it was Rikugan for a minute, but I think now it's Kuratura again. So it is an issue if you over detail setting that you plan on giving or selling, because you're basically telling the end user how they have to do things in the setting. And I don't like that. So that's why I love the original Gazetteer, when it talks about, like, the kingdom of Nyrund. It says, 99% human, rest, whatever. The king is this dude. This is their exports and imports. And it gives you, like, one paragraph about the kingdom of Nyrund. And it gives you a shield that has their heraldry on it. And done, and that's it. I would like to do my setting book like that. But
would you make it like a system agnostic, or would you put stat for stuff, or you?
I would make it completely system agnostic, just like the two aforementioned setting books. I mean, I think Alexander Macris, the guy who made Adventure Conqueror King and the setting, the Iron Empire, is a genius. I talked to him pretty frequently. He's Greek, so we always wish each other happy Easter and all that. Because we celebrate the old calendar holidays. And I think Adventure Conqueror King is an amazing setting. As a matter of fact, the setting is what drew me to the game. I bought the setting first, and when I read how I play it is there's no 7 ethereals or whatever. There's just one God, right? And so I made it a monotheism, but I kept all the demons. So, like the Zoroasti or whatever they're called, and all their different demonic gods, they're still there. And the players actually really liked it. My wife played a blade dancer up to like level 6 or 7, but we always joked with her because she started using pole arms. So we started calling her a pole dancer, which was technically correct. But that's a cleric class that can only use slashing bladed weapons, including pole arms. But they can only wear light armor. But otherwise, they do get cleric spells, But they're it's kind of like they're weird. They're like a cleric that's good at fighting.
Do you find that making the world monotheistic influence the way that the players interact with the religion of the world?
Absolutely, because I ran all of the adventures that come out for ACK, the first at least 4 or 5 of them, and that first one, the basically Macris's version of Keep on the Borderland, they start out dealing with a Roman legate who has been sent to the frontier because of he did some politically bad stuff back at the capital. And they have to deal with him, right? Yeah, they only wear light armor, leather, yeah. So they were always dealing with the legate or the high priest or the priestess, of that, the goddess, and, all of this and that and whatever. And yeah, I liked it. I thought it was good. The pole dancer class only wear leather. That is a fact.
That's funny.
But they they're called blade dancers, but they always end up, because as a blade dancer, she did have a couple of scimitars she would use. But when she realized how much more damage she could do with a pole arm,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not that my wife is a min-maxer, but when she learns rules,
well, people like
she will
the character
optimize
would
the
learn that
character.
as well. The character in the world would learn that as well. You know, they say, "Oh,
Right.
I got
She
my
will
centaur," but
optimize her character. Like
yeah,
in Warhammer,
Mm.
I made them all draw characters at random that I had made completely
Mm-hmm.
at random. And Hungar drew a high elf scout,
Mm-hmm.
but he didn't want to play it. So he gave that character to my wife, and she's been putting all of her advances in like ranged bow and stuff like that. So she's optimizing the character to be a really good high elf archer, and it makes sense, you know. Um, but yeah, my future for gaming, I might do a setting book, but I haven't really planned anything, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But the game is out there and it's free. And if you want to change anything about it and use it however you want, do it. If you like the mechanics that I came up with, and I'm sure I was inspired by other people, use them for your own game. It would work for a sci-fi game too. I mean, it would work for any game
Mm.
because it's basically I'm shooting you with my blaster pistol. I roll a die 20. I add whatever attribute you decide matters, plus my skill with blaster pistol. And if I beat your dodge roll, I hit you.
Mm.
Boom, you know? It's such an easy system. It could be used for any genre, but of course I did it fantasy because I hang out with a bunch of people who all love fantasy settings. That's what they want to play.
Mm. I hope we can see some other stuff from you being published even for free, stuff like that. Even if you want to sell it, like DM James, because I think you have good idea. I'd like to see like some adventure, some setting for you, because like I said, I've been following your channel for a while, and even though like you say you take inspiration from elsewhere, you always give it a spin there that is interesting, that is fresh, and that is cool.
Yeah, like the dwarves in my homebrew setting are basically Finnish
Mm-hmm.
instead of being that, you know, Tolkien,
Russian, yeah, Russian,
freaking
Jewish, Scottish
Jewish, but
mix.
with Scottish
Yeah.
accents. My dwarves are Finnish, and the gnomes are directly related to the dwarves, and they actually tend to live and cohabitate in the same areas.
Hmm.
But and they love to wear really bright clothes. So when you find a dwarf out and about, they will dress very garishly
Mm-hmm.
because they live underground and they look at rock all day. So when they paint their homes and stuff, they tend to paint them like crazy purples and stuff, you know, because the dwarves love color. They just happen to live in an area where there's not very much of it.
Yeah.
And then gnomes are just their little brothers who can use magic.
The name of the
Dwarves
game
can't
is
use
The
magic.
Legend of the Middle Kingdom.
Yeah, it
It,
was called The Legend of the Middle Kingdom because I couldn't come up with anything else. And I think the Middle Kingdom or the Middle World is what the Vikings used to
yeah,
call Earth.
Midgard. Yeah.
But if you go to Biggest Geekus, the Geek Emporium, and you just type in DM James, you'll get one project, and it'll be DM James game. I wrote this when I was
Yeah,
on
and
lockdown.
again, the link is in the description under this video as well. So if you're watching that later, or if even now, you can click on it and go right away.
And I want to warn all of you guys watching, it's very amateurish. I'd never written anything really before except for some short stories that, you know, when I was much younger. So I wrote it as a PDF on Microsoft Word. And I thought it was good at the time. And then I had it on PDF and on Lulu for a while, or Lulu Publishing. And then people were like, hey, you should upload this on, you know, and so I finally did. It took me a while because I'm such a boomer that I was like, how do I upload this? Like I wanted to put my exploding dice DM James for the you know, where but I can't figure out how to do it. It keeps saying it won't let me do it. So maybe it's too small or too big or too something, too many pixels. But yeah, it's 130 something pages. It gives you classes are not really classes, and what your character grew up as has a huge effect on what skills you start with, and also modifies your attributes. The race you choose modifies attributes and also skills. And then once you get going, you can spend when you level up, you get skill points that you can spend to raise skills or learn new skills or whatever like that. So yeah, it's basically kind of a fantasy role-playing game, but it's skill-based. And then, of course, the mechanic, it only uses a die 20. It could have easily been a percentile game now that I think about it. If I just converted everything by 5%, it
could also be like if someone finds that the dice 20 is too swingy, it'd be very easy to just say, okay, we're going to do die 12, or that could be, and then everything you can just like cut down a bit the target number, because it's so simple. It's the mechanic gets out of the way. It's very hackable.
Yeah, it's very rules light. Once you learn how everything works, it's super rules light. The most complicated part of the game is actually the damage, because certain weapons are 0.5, most weapons are 1s, and then some weapons are 1.5s. So you might have to do a little math when you're doing weapon damage. But other than that, and just remember, every hit does at least 1 damage to whoever you hit. So even if you keep rolling just barely better than your opponent, eventually you'll beat him death. I mean, that, like, you're just pounding on his armor until eventually he just passes out from it. You never really land the big stab that kills him. You just keep pounding on him until he drops. But yeah, it's a pretty good game. In my opinion, like I said, my all of the people I gamed with loved it. My daughter says it's the only game she will play because I guess she got so used to it. And oh man, there was drama too on that campaign because the gnome maid found out where the pirate base was, but instead of going to the tavern and telling the rest of the group, he decided to cast a fly spell and fly there. And he started trying to fight all of the pirates by himself, and he died.
Oh wow!
And my daughter got so pissed off at him because the combat took about 30 minutes before he finally died, right?
Yeah.
And everyone's just sitting there watching him. And at the end of it, they're like, you ruined the game for everybody because you wanted to be the big badass hero all by yourself. You could have come and told us. We would have took a boat to the island and helped you. But you had to do it yourself because you thought you were just such a badass. Oh, man. My daughter was so pissed off. She was playing, I think, a halfling assassin because she always does.
Yeah.
Oh, she was so pissed off. Like her and my nephew, she yelled at him, man. He apologized to her and stuff. But then later she said, the only game I'll ever play is that game. Because she felt like she actually had full control of her character. She could do what she wanted. When her character leveled, she could choose what she wanted her character to do. Did she want to get better at making poisons? Did she want to get better at, sneaking up on people? It was all up to her, and she really liked that. But anyway, that's all I got to say about it.
Well, kudos for you to putting yourself out there, like making something that you made available, even though you say, oh, it's like, maybe it's not perfect and stuff like that. It's there. People can look at it.
Yeah.
It takes quite a lot of balls to do it. So there's always like respect on my end for that. And thank you for coming on the show as well on short notice, because like the guests I had planned, I had something coming up. I didn't know what to do. I asked you yesterday, like, and you said yes.
You need to get Victor on if you haven't already.
Oh, I did. He was my first guest.
That dude is cranking stuff out like on the daily.
Yeah. Oh, but,
he's very it was a good stream. You did a great job as running this stream. You really did.
Thank you.
I had fun, so thank you very much.
Well, thank you for coming up, and I'll see you around, man. I like to watch your show. The link for DM James channel is in the description. I assume most of you are familiar with him, but if you're not, for some reason, go watch him up
on Calvaryman.
Yeah. All right, thank you, man. Have a good day. I'm gonna end the stream now, and I'll see you around. Take care.
I'll see you around.
Bye. Thank you for everybody watching as well. I do those things live for the audience, so thank you for coming up. Thank you. Bye.